Greetings, ladies and laddies, and welcome back to another episode of Brink of Arts eBay Rescues. In the last, and my first video, we rescued a squad of Imperial Guardsmen who looked like they passed the warp without stable gallop fields and got them to a standard that could put even the Mordian Iron Guard to shame. For this video, we stick with the Imperium and rescue some Space Marines. Can we just shortly acknowledge the fact that the dude sent them to me in the Tupperware box? Anyway, we've got 6 Space Marine models, 5 Terminators and 1 Chaplain. 4 of the Terminators are equipped with Stormclaws and the captain wields sword and shield. He also carries a backup hammer up his back, in case he wants to go full berserk mode. All in all, a strictly melee focused squadron, with a lot of cool kit bashing going on. Very aggressive, very offensive, and very heavily armored. As I'm editing this, I found that the chaplain would stretch the video to an uncomfortable length, so I left him out completely for this. He will get his own video, which will come out next week if you're interested. The armor of each Terminator is painted purple, with white being the accentuating color. Now, I'm not that good with the different Space Marine chapters, so I needed to do a little bit of an investigation about these Purple Marines, and also conferred with a friend. In the end, we concluded they could either be Soul Drinkers or Hawk Lords. They both look very similar to the models at hand, but the white trims on their pauldrons and other parts of their armor quite clearly indicate them as Soul Drinkers. Now, the Soul Drinkers are a renegade Space Marine chapter originating from the Imperial Fists, founded after the Horus Heresy and declared traitors to the Imperium after a heavy exposure to chaos. The interesting part is that the Soul Drinkers themselves still believe to act in the will of the Emperor, never becoming traitors. Looks like heresy to me. But enough about the lore. Let's get back to analyzing the pre-owner's paint job. The details like the trims and the writings on the parchments are very thick and wonky, and there are also quite a few spots where paint's built into areas it shouldn't be. One of the main problems I have with the models though are their ornaments, which are painted with such a thick coat of paint that it's actually smoothing out the casted details on the models. Oh boy, am I looking forward to bringing these lovely details back. There's also 3 bits broken off of the models, but it was quite obvious where they belonged. I will leave them detached for the time being though, just so we have an easier time working with them. Another oddity I noticed about the minis are the letters E and C, painted on each and every one of them. Now I always loved the stories and the vision the pre-owner had in mind, but I couldn't get my head around the E and C. What are they standing for? I actually reached out to the seller to ask for more information about it, but sadly I never got a reply. All in all, the models are painted quite alright. There's nothing majorly bad going on. I honestly thought they'd be in the worst condition, judging by the photos on eBay, so I'm gonna go all in with these to really try and make them stand out to the state they're in now. So buckle up, buckaroos, we're in for an adventurous ride. A ride with a bumpy start, for I initially did not know how I wanted to go about these guys. At first, I wanted to just correct the white trims, but I feared that the result would be patchy and rough, so I decided to start completely anew and give the Terminator's armor a complete overhaul, with a lot of lighting and shading going on. This sounded very intimidating to me, because these here are all my variations of blue, and this is my full purple range. After searching through the remnants of one of my friend's dropped Warhammer collections, I found another one. Now equipped with twice as many purple colors, I was confident to tackle the task at hand. At first, I covered just the outer armor parts like the pauldrons and the tassets with Zeroist purple, because I really liked the pinch of red in the original color and wanted to preserve it if possible. Having the initial base coating now complete, I honestly wasn't sure about the outcome though. With these mixed feelings, I took the Terminator with the completely white crotch armor, solely for the reason that he already kinda looked unique anyway, and painted all of his armor panels with Zeroy's purple. Comparing the two versions, I like the completely overhauled version better and decided to paint all Terminators this way. Once I was happy with every Terminator's purple base coat, it was time for the highlights. I wanted the armor to be quite reflective, but not as reflective as thoroughly polished metal like my gauntlet here. First off, I needed to make a plan for the light hitting the armor. I used the direct light from my lamp shining on the minis as reference and put down Genestealer purple everywhere where I wanted the highlights to be, achieving a very stark contrast like you sometimes see in comic art. This step merely serves as a guide for future steps, so we don't need to be very precise here. It may look like I've done this like 100 times and therefore know exactly what I'm doing, but honestly this was something I was quite afraid of. I've never painted reflective armor in a non-metallic metal style, but with a little bit of time I became more confident in what I was doing and actually started to have a lot of fun with it. After all, that's what it's all about, right? As soon as every highlight was laid out, I started with the blending techniques, namely wet blending. To explain it shortly, wet blending is a technique for mixing two colors, while still wet on the model, to create a seamless transition between the two. You put both colors where you want them to be, and start pushing and pulling the still wet paints into one another, until you get a smooth transition where they meet. When done correctly, both paints blend into each other seamlessly without any stark separating line. Someone asked me in a comment under my last video how much time I needed for the models, and I unfortunately couldn't really give an exact answer. So, this time I had a timer running whenever I painted for this video. Unfortunately, I got carried away during the painting process and forgot to turn the timer back on after the wet blending. Sorry for that. I'll definitely try and remember for the next projects. Anyway, the wet blending took me around 6 hours for all Terminators and I think that it was absolutely worth it. The result is kind of hard to show on camera because the actual reflections from my lamp obscure the painted reflections. But I just take this as a nod to my painting skills. Of course, they are far from perfect. As you can see here, some reflexes are way smoother blended than others, because I didn't exactly know how shiny I wanted the armor to be. But for first, I think they look great. In the next step, I edge highlighted the armor panels like the greaves, the gauntlets, and basically all other parts that won't get white trims later down the track. Having the edge highlighting of the armor all complete, I took Ulthuan Grey and moved on to the white trims that I had removed earlier. If you want to do something like this yourself, tilting the brush at a 90°-ish angle helps keeping the brush strokes under control and prevents wonky lines such as the ones the models had at the beginning. I took quite some time, often going back and fixing mistakes with purple as they occurred. In the beginning, I just painted the trims on the pauldrons, because I feared the white lines could get too wide, overpowering the nice blending I put so much time and effort in. To try the white trims on the tassets and the bezigue, yep, I looked it up too, I took the guy with the white crotch armor again, applying the white almost as if I was edge highlighting. Damn, that looks nice! The white lines don't obscure or overpower the blending at all, but rather even enhance their glow, building a nice frame for them. So of course, everyone needs to get their white trims. As you're watching me paint these, I just want to quickly announce that if you would like to see me paint a specific mini, then please feel free to reach out to me either in the comments or via PM. I also have an Instagram profile to reach out to, where I post detailed photos of the minis I paint and always keep you guys updated on my current projects. Or struggles. If you'd like to have a look, I have a link in the description. Okay, after that brief intermission of shameless self-advertisement, all Terminators have got their iconic white trims back. But we're not quite done with them yet. I took white scar, an even brighter white, and reinforce the white everywhere where the blending on the armor meets the trim. Again, a very subtle step that just slightly enhances the realistic look of the light hitting the armor even further. Having the purple and the white sorted out, I took care of the metallic parts of the armor next. First up, I cleaned off all of the silver rods on the armor carefully with lead belcher. I then washed the exhausts, the big cables and the recesses of the Stormclaws with Nuln Oil. After that, I picked out the strongly lit areas with Iron Breaker for some further subtle lighting effects and a little bit more contrast. This also helped greatly with bringing back the contours of the big cables. Staying with the metal colors, I turned my attention to the golden ornaments on the Terminators. As I said in my initial evaluation of the paint job, the ornaments are just absolutely clogged up with paint, almost losing their sculpted details. I tried a lot of different methods trying to bring the details back, only to find out that the easiest method yielded the very best results. For all the ornaments, I fixed the base coat with Gehenna's Gold and then washed them heavily with Nuln Oil. The wash quickly settled itself into the remaining recesses, and you can already see the details coming through again. I then picked the raised, strongly lit areas out with Gehenna's Gold again. Even though we use the same color as we did for the base coat, it works as a highlight because the base coat has been dulled down with Nuln Oil so much. Having the armor of every Terminator now complete, we can move on to the weapons, starting with the Captain's Energy Sword and its crackling lightning effect. Again, something that I never painted before. The pre-owner painted the lightning green, so I will stick with that. I first painted the whole sword with Abaddon Black to get a clean canvas to work with. Using Varg Flash, I laid out some quite wide lines, roughly planning the movement of the lightning, much like I did with the light on the armor. Being a bit more delicate this time, I got some Cabalite green and traced the laid out lines again. I then took a finer brush and Scarsnick green and painted inside the lines I laid out before. With adding each new color, I still try to leave a bit of the original color still showing. After that, I mixed Scarsnick green and Flash Gitz yellow in equal parts and painted the parts where several strings of the lightning meet. For the final glow effect, I used white Scar and painted it sparingly on the intersections and the ends of the energy lines. As the last step, I edge highlighted the entire blade with Scarsnick green and white Scar. And that's apparently how you get an awesome looking energy sword on the first try! Nice! Next are the Stormclaws. I really didn't like the initial simple brass metallic look because, come on guys, we are over 40,000 years in the future and the superhuman soldiers created by the God Emperor himself still use simple swords and daggers? I started by basing the claws with Cabalite green to tie the glow effect together with the Captain's Energy Sword. While the paint was still wet, I blended multiple layers of Scarsnick green into the mix, making sure to get brighter as I moved to the tips of each claw. I wanted it to look like the energy was building up on the ends of the claw to strike the enemy right on impact. Moving on, I glazed the whole thing with Nihilak Oxide, which is actually a technical color, but we'll disregard that for now. I then painted the very tips with Ulthuan Grey, before finally edge highlighting the claws very carefully with white Scar. Now that's what I call futuristic Stormclaws of the 41st millennium. The predecessors do just not compete. Okay, one set of claws done, 7 more to go. A quick note, I couldn't really batch paint this effect because the paint needed to be wet for this effect to work, so I needed to paint each set completely before moving on to the next. Definitely a quite tedious work, but with a great result. Having them equipped with their new fancy weapons, I moved on to the next big thing that was irritating me, the parchments. Needing a complete overhaul, I first gave them a new base coat with Steel Legion drab. I needed to paint 2 layers because the black lines still clearly poked through after the first one. I then gave them a heavy wash with Agrex's Earthshade. After the wash had enough time to thoroughly dry, I dry brushed Xandri dust onto the parchments to get a rough, paper-like texture, and highlighted the edges and folds with fine lines of Ushabti bone. For the writing, I used Abaddon Black and traced very fine lines only using the very tips of my detail brush. Because some of the parchments were big enough to cover an entire shoulder, I thought it would be quite boring to just have them show some simple black lines. I opened image search on my tablet and very carefully freehanded the blazon of the Soul Drinkers on some of the big parchments and redesigned the original C and E from the pre-owner's paint job, whatever they may stand for. I also completely overhauled the parchments that were fallen off of the models and glued them back in place. The purity seals got fixed up with Worldbearer Surette and then washed with Karabor Crimson. To finish them off, I gave them a subtle highlighting with Mephiston Red. As we were already on the Captain's shield, I think it's time for it to be overhauled too. Starting with the golden trims, I used Gehenna's Gold to fix up any previous spills. After that, I gave the eagle a new base coat with Dawnstone and Skavenblight Dinge before washing it with Nuln Oil. I then carefully highlighted the torso with Dawnstone and the wings with Administratum Grey to bring all of the finely casted feathers back to show. For the skull, I used Xandri dust for the base coat, Agrex's Earthshade for the wash, and Ushabti bone as the highlighting color. As the very last step on the shield, I added some depth to the design with a little bit of careful panel lining, using a very watered down version of Abaddon Black. Coming really close to the finishing line, we can move on to the Captain's face. Honestly, I think the face is not all that bad, it's just ever so slightly off. The contrast on the skin tones is a bit too stark. There are some spots where the paint has just been awkwardly slopped on, and the eyes are just a little too big. I really wasn't sure if I could do much better, especially considering the awkward angles I'd have to twist my brush in order to bypass the shield, the sword and the armor itself. I started by base coating the whole head with Buckman's Glow. After that, I took Raglan Flesh Shade to make the recesses visible again. To bring the details back, I carefully traced the casting with Cadian Flesh Tone, leaving plenty of the previous colors still visible. For the eyes and teeth, I used White Scar and Abaddon Black. This is the result, and honestly, I'm not that happy with it. It's definitely not as good as the job I did with the Cadian Sergeant, and it's also kinda missing the kind of glow up the other parts have to their predecessors. The very last thing that needs some patching up in this project is the energy hammer the Captain is carrying on his back. I started by base coating the hilt with Buckman's Glow. My idea was to give the hilt the look of red leather, and I thought it would be best to start with a reddish skin color. After that, I washed the hilt with Karabor Crimson, which looked heckin' gross. At this stage I'm really questioning if I'm doing it right. Especially when I started picking out the details with dots of Mephiston Red. Ugh! This looks so ugly right now, but we have to keep going. And it looks surprisingly okay. And that's why you should always trust in the process, ladies and laddies. Alright, moving on. The next thing I did was fixing the gold and washing the whole thing with Nuln Oil. To give the whole thing more depth and visual interest, I finished it up with picking out the details again using Ironbreaker and my detail brush. And with that, we're done! I'm very happy with how the models turned out in the end, and I think we can confidently pronounce this transformation a success. It was really fun trying out all of the new techniques, painting all of the different effects going on with these minis. From the reflections on the armor over the glowing of the Stormclaws to the lightning of the energy sword, there was just so much exciting stuff going on that the time really flew past me. I hope you liked the video and maybe recommend it to a friend who might like it too. And if you didn't, you can recommend it to your enemies to make them suffer too. We still have the chapter left, so if you want, please consider subscribing to catch his transformation next week. For there are still a lot of models out there that could use some more love and care, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again in my next video. As for now, take care. I'm very happy with how the models turned out in the end, and I think we can confidently pronounce this sound. I took the guy with the white crotch armor again, applying the white almost as if God damn it! Applying the white almost as if God damn it! Now that's what I call futuristic Stormclaws. Now that's what I call futuristic Stormclaws of the 31st. Again, the 31st. You know what? I fucked this slide up so many times, I'm ready to accept that it's just the 31st millennium. God damn it. The 41st. Can I get it right?